So today I want to talk about evictions and the new CDC Eviction Moratorium. Now, the Biden administration had previously extended the eviction moratorium through July 31st of this year. However, Congress, of course, failed to pass any sort of extension on this, and this is largely due to the same reasons that a lot of other economic policies have not been able to be passed, which would have otherwise helped and protected people. This means that as of August 1st, all of the federal protections for tenants against being evicted have in fact ended. And while some states do in fact still have certain eviction protections, which may last for a few more months, this hardly extends to everyone, and a federal response really is necessary here. Now, given all of this and the fact that the Delta variant now continues to spread, the CDC has attempted to use its power to prevent further evictions as part of the response to this health crisis. Now, we have here from the CDC themselves that the director, Rochelle Walensky, today signed an order determining the evictions of tenants for failure to make rent or housing payments could be detrimental to public health control measures to slow the spread of SARS-CoV-2, and that the order will expire as of October 3rd of 2021. This really extends things for about 2 months, which might help some people be able to at least work on trying to find an alternative if they are in fact ready to be evicted. This applies to all counties experiencing substantial and high levels of community transmission levels of SARS-CoV-2. So unfortunately, this no longer applies to everyone. It's not universal. As a matter of fact, it's only going to be in areas where transmission levels remain high. However, due to the Delta variant, from what I understand, this is still about 80% of the country that will be covered by this particular moratorium. Now, the eviction moratorium allows additional time for rent relief to reach renters and to further increase vaccination rates in the context of a pandemic. Eviction moratoria like quarantine, isolation, and social distancing can be an effective public health measure utilized to prevent the spread of communicable disease. This moratoria and others like it facilitate self-isolation and self-quarantine by people who will become ill or who are at risk of transmitting COVID-19 by keeping people out of congregate settings and in their own homes. And really, that's a large part of this, right? When it comes to the pandemic itself, and especially to this Delta variant that's becoming really an issue, thankfully vaccines are seemingly working against it, but we don't know if there will be any sort of other variant in the future that may not work with the vaccine. There is a large issue in the fact that people, when they lose their homes, will in fact end up in situations where they are likely to spread the virus more, either due to the fact that they will be in more crowded spaces with more family members occupying smaller spaces, or by having an increase in houselessness, which will in fact make things more difficult to deal with federally. Now, the emergence of the Delta variant has led to rapid acceleration of community transmission in the United States, putting more Americans at increased risk, especially if they are unvaccinated. And it's really frightening how low the vaccination levels really are in the US right now. A lot of people still don't have their first dose, let alone their second. And most of that's because people are choosing not to get it, not because they're not available. And to those who can't get it for a number of reasons, whether that's health risks or other factors that are actually legitimate, it's kind of frustrating to see so many people just completely ignore the needs of their fellow people. This moratorium is the right thing to do to keep people in their homes and out of congregate settings where COVID-19 can spread. It is imperative that public health authorities act quickly to mitigate such increases of evictions, which could increase the likelihood of new spikes in COVID-19. And again, that will lead to potentially more variants forming, and that could lead to long-term difficulties. Now, the CDC did put out a document to declare that you want eviction protection that will supposedly protect you through October 3rd. Now, I don't know if this is planned to be extended anything beyond that. However, there are some questions about that October 3rd date, which we will get to after this document. Now, if in order to qualify, you have to fulfill at least one thing from column A and column B on this form. Column A is that you have had a stimulus check from 2020 or 2021, that you were not required to report any income to the IRS in 2020, that you receive either SNAP, TAMF, SSI, or SSDI, and that in 2020 or 2021, you earned less than $99,000 as an individual or less than $198,000 as a joint filer. As long as you check one of those, you're good. In addition to that, you either need to be in a household where income has gone down substantially, where someone has been laid off from work, where your work hours or wages have been cut, or where you have extraordinary out of pocket medical expenses. If you qualify for both of those, one from each category, and you can declare that your income levels are, as you explained, that you are in a community where you have to call up HUD to determine that exactly. But if you're in a community where there's high rates of community transmission levels, where you have done your best to make timely partial payments, and where you have a situation where if you were in fact to be evicted, that you would have no other housing options, or very limited housing options, and that you will likely have to pay your landlord back after all of this ends. And that's really one of the things that's frustrating about all of this from where I'm sitting is, yes, this is working through the part of the pandemic. And that's important. That's valid. I'm not denying the fact that the CDC should be, in fact, doing this. My issue is that this isn't addressing the fact that all of these rent payments keep getting deferred and pushed off. You keep having situations where these are accumulating. If you can't make $300 of the payment one month, and then the next month you can't make $400, and then the next month you can't make another $300, that's $1,000 that you're already in the hole. And that means that your landlord's going to move to evict right after. And that means that there's a looming economic crisis behind all of this. And of course, there's no real relief in that regard. And it's frustrating because at the end of all of this, people really do need relief and help to get past these points. And they shouldn't be at the risk of losing their homes, largely due to a pandemic, but also largely due to the fact that the country and the world itself wasn't prepared in this regard for this pandemic. But especially the US was not prepared for this. And that's hardly anyone's fault outside of government institutions and the systems that we have. Now, the unfortunate reality with all this, and I brought this up briefly before, October 3rd may not even be the date that we can rely on. Landlords have already begun to start appealing to courts in order to get this overturned. And there's every possibility that the conservative Supreme Court will in fact overturn this decision, which will again lead to greater houselessness, greater economic problems, and more importantly, in this case, illness and death. And with the increase of houselessness, that's going to cause much more problems as well. And so this is all kind of coming to a head. Now, the reason we know this is that there have already been courts, such as in Hamilton County in Cincinnati, Ohio, where a lot of where the courts there have allowed for an eviction case to start despite the new moratorium. There's other places that I've come across, if you just glance through some local news stories, where courts are in fact ignoring a lot of this, which means it's not long until it hits the Supreme Court again. And only a few weeks ago, Justice Kavanaugh had allowed the moratorium to continue with the following caveat. I agree with the district court and all the applicants that the Center for Disease Control and Prevention exceeded its existing statutory authority by issuing a nationwide eviction moratorium. Because the CDC plans to end the moratorium in only a few weeks on July 31st, and because those few weeks will allow for additional and more orderly distribution of congressional appropriated rental assistance funds, I voted this time to deny the application to vacate the district court's stay of order. However, that's quite clear, as he says, in my view, clear and specific congressional authorization via new legislation would be necessary for the CDC to extend the moratorium past July. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. Again, for all the reasons that have prevented everything else from happening to protect people economically in this past year plus. And the issue really comes down to the fact that even with them tempering this off and only applying it to certain areas, I don't think that's going to be enough for this conservative Supreme Court, which means if it gets to the Supreme Court, they're likely to shoot this down. This was only on June 29th that he said that. Kavanaugh was willing to go another month, but not beyond that point. Now, it is worth noting as well that we are still in a place where 13 million Americans are within 2 months of either losing their house because of eviction or foreclosure due to not being able to pay for this. Those are adults, mind you, that's not counting children. And the problem with all of this really comes down to the fact that there is nothing to catch people when they fall from this. As I stated before, there's a lot of people who are either going to end up moving in with members of their family that are going to cause largely crowded situations, or people are going to end up houseless. And if they do in fact end up houseless, we've seen what's going on with that. There's a war literally being waged against houseless people right now. And we see that in LA, where at Venice Beach, the police literally showed up heavily armed with ARs, pointing guns at people on the beach to try to get them removed. Where Portland has high-profile sweeps of homeless camps, and there are multiple of them going on. Where New York is pushing homeless people off the streets, and the question is, where will they go? And really, with a lot of this, the question really does become, what are people supposed to do? The CDC guidelines are just a temporary measure of things to help until the pandemic ends. And even that is likely to be challenged by this conservative government and the conservative Supreme Court. The evictions are going to lead to much greater levels of crowding and houselessness, which will eventually lead to spreading more of the virus. And with the Delta variant being what it is and spreading as much as it is, given that we don't know what future variants are going to hold, that already causes a problem. But far beyond that, that's not even accounting for the fact that people are struggling. There are people literally thousands and thousands of dollars in back paid rent due in these situations where they are never going to be able to make that up. And it's just going to leave them in debt for an extended period of time. And as I've talked about on this channel before, if you end up losing your home or your house rather due to being evicted once, it's going to make it that much harder to get into another house. You're going to be in these situations for an extended period of time. And this just snowballs. And this is a lot of people who have already ended up houseless due to a lot of these conditions. And it's just going to keep getting worse. People are struggling, and the government is doing nothing about it. And really what this comes down to is something really needs to give and something really needs to change. And all I can recommend is get to know your neighbors if you don't know them, work together with them if you do know them already, and try to create conversations about who is at risk for eviction and try to protect them. Form tenant associations, form any sort of group organization that you can come to, any sort of collective bargaining that you might be able to put out there, any sort of mutual aid that you can create for each other. Try to do it, because without that, we are going to see more and more people put out, and we are going to see more people get sick. And I swear, if a variant of any kind starts to get past these vaccines, where we have to start this whole cycle again, or boosters become necessary, we are going to be in a place where this is just going to become normal. This death cult position that we're in, where people are just comfortable with so many people dying, is going to become normal. This position where all of this is considered normal, that people are going to end up houseless, is absurd. And I just don't know what the solution is at this point, other than just band together and try to work with the people around you. So with that said, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button and bell for notifications. You can follow me on Twitter and check out my Discord in the description down below. My name is Anarchist Tara, and I thank you for watching.